I never imagined that one night could change the way I looked at myself forever. It was supposed to be ordinary, quiet, predictable, like all the other evenings I'd spent alone in this house. But sometimes, temptation has a way of finding you when you're at your weakest, and what happened that night still lingers in my memory like a shadow I can't escape. The rain had been falling steadily since late afternoon, drumming softly against the windows, turning everything outside into a blur of gray. I had been restless all day, pacing from room to room, unable to concentrate on anything. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was the weight of years of silence in my marriage, or maybe it was the glass of wine in my hand that made me more vulnerable than I wanted to admit. He came in without warning. I heard the door shut and the sound of his footsteps echoing in the hallway. My heart skipped when I realized it was him, someone I should have seen only as familiar, harmless company. But the moment he entered the room, something inside me stirred. He was different that night. His presence felt heavier, stronger somehow, as though he carried an energy I hadn't noticed before. He smiled at me in a way that wasn't just polite, it was deliberate, charged with something unspoken. I should have looked away, reminded myself of who I was and what was at stake, but instead, I let my eyes linger too long. We talked casually at first, words floating between us like harmless smoke. But underneath the conversation, there was an undercurrent neither of us wanted to acknowledge. His laughter was deeper, his gaze held mine longer, and the space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving closer. At one point, he reached for the wine glass I had set on the table, his fingers brushing mine as he took it. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it sent a current through me that left me breathless. My pulse quickened, and I felt the air in the room grow thick, heavy with an anticipation I didn't dare name. I told myself it was wrong. That I should stand up, put distance between us, and end the moment before it grew into something dangerous. But when I tried to speak, my voice caught in my throat. He was watching me, his eyes steady, calm, and yet there was a fire in them that I couldn't look away from. Then, without warning, he leaned in closer. My body tensed, every instinct telling me to pull back, but I didn't move. His breath was warm against my cheek, and when he whispered something I could barely register, my heart nearly stopped. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice steady, reassuring, and yet filled with something that made me tremble. "Just let it happen." In that instant, the wall I had built for years began to crack. My resistance faltered, and before I knew it, I was caught in a moment that felt bigger, stronger, and beyond anything I had ever allowed myself to feel before. I should have pushed him away. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop, to take a step back and remind him, and myself, of the boundaries that existed for a reason. But my body betrayed me. Instead of moving, I stayed frozen, trembling, my heart racing as though I had been waiting for this moment without ever admitting it. He moved closer, his hand brushing against mine again, slower this time, intentional. I felt the heat of his touch travel up my arm, setting my skin ablaze. My breath caught in my throat, and I whispered, "This isn't right." He looked straight into my eyes, calm and steady, and said, "It's all right. Just trust me." Those words hit me harder than I expected. They were dangerous, yet soothing, giving me permission to release the weight of control I had carried for so long. I wanted to argue, to remind him, and myself, that this was forbidden. But my lips never formed the words. Instead, they trembled in silence as his hand slid gently to the back of my neck, his touch firm, grounding, impossible to resist. When his lips brushed mine, everything inside me shattered. Years of loneliness, of longing for intimacy that had slipped away from my marriage, came crashing to the surface. I kissed him back before I could even think about the consequences. It was wrong, God, I knew it was wrong, but it felt intoxicating. His kiss was deeper, stronger, filled with hunger that mirrored the emptiness I had been carrying for so long. The sound of the rain outside faded, replaced by the pounding of my heartbeat in my ears. His hands moved with certainty, exploring in ways that made me ache, and yet every touch felt like both a comfort and a betrayal. I wanted him to stop, and yet I needed him to continue. The war between guilt and desire raged inside me, but desire was winning. I pulled back for a moment, gasping, my chest rising and falling rapidly. "We can't," I whispered, my voice trembling with fear and need. But he only leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. "You've been holding back for too long," he whispered. "Don't fight it. Just let yourself feel." And with those words, I gave in. My defenses crumbled, and I let myself be carried away by the intensity of his touch, the strength in his arms, the overwhelming way he consumed me. Everything about him felt larger than life, his presence, his hunger, his control. It was bigger, stronger, and beyond anything I had ever experienced before. Time seemed to blur as the night unfolded. I lost myself in him, surrendering piece by piece until there was nothing left but raw sensation. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat felt amplified, pulling me deeper into the moment. When it was finally over, the silence that filled the room was deafening. I sat there trembling, my body still reeling from what had just happened, while my mind screamed at me with guilt. I couldn't meet his eyes. Shame burned hot in my chest, heavy and suffocating. He reached for my hand gently, his thumb brushing against my skin as though to comfort me. "It's okay," he whispered again, that same dangerous reassurance. "No one has to know." But that was the problem. I would know. I would carry this memory with me, a secret I could never erase, a sin I could never confess. And as the rain continued to fall outside, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. I thought the storm inside me would ease once it was over, but the silence after was heavier than the rain outside. My whole body trembled, not from what he'd done, but from the realization that I hadn't stopped him. That I hadn't wanted to. He sat beside me, calm, collected, almost as though nothing had happened. But I couldn't even breathe without feeling the weight of guilt pressing down on me. My marriage, my vows, the years I had promised loyalty, they all flashed through my mind like sharp, unforgiving images. And yet, the echo of his touch lingered stronger than the guilt. I pulled the blanket around myself, trying to create a barrier between us, but it was useless. The memory of his strength, the way he made me feel, was already etched into me. I whispered, more to myself than to him, "We shouldn't have, we can't ever." He turned his head slowly, his eyes steady, and with a calmness that both comforted and terrified me, he said, "You don't have to regret it. Not everything that feels this real is a mistake." His words cut through me. A part of me wanted to believe him, to hold on to the fire he had ignited inside me, because it was the first time in years I had felt alive. But another part of me recoiled, horrified at what I had allowed myself to do. I stood, pacing the room, my arms wrapped tightly around myself as if I could squeeze the guilt out. "You don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. It can't happen again. It shouldn't have happened at all." He didn't argue. He just watched me, his expression unreadable, as though he already knew that no matter how many times I said it, the truth was that a line had been crossed. And once crossed, it could never be undone. When he finally left, the sound of the door closing behind him felt like both relief and abandonment. I sank to the floor, my back against the couch, and buried my face in my hands. The rain outside had softened into a drizzle, but inside me, the storm raged on. That night has haunted me ever since. Every glance across the dinner table at my husband, every innocent smile, every quiet evening we shared afterward, beneath it all, the memory pulsed like a wound that refused to heal. It was bigger, stronger, and beyond anything I thought I could feel. But it was also the one thing that shattered who I believed I was. I tell myself I'll never let it happen again. But deep down, I know the truth. Some lines, once crossed, live inside you forever. And no matter how much you try to hide it, you can't unfeel what you felt.